guys know these folks, please give it up for Evan Ryan and Jayanti Nand.
Aloha everyone. Aloha. Alright, so here we are talking about planting for our future, which is what we're all here for. Is to learn to plant better and get out in the earth and cultivate food, cultivate beauty, so that we can enjoy it, but so also that future generations can enjoy it. And today we're kind of going back to the basics here. We're talking about how to plant a tree. And both Jayanti and I spend a lot of time with trees. We spend a lot of time caring for trees that other people have planted, and we spend a lot of time planting trees. And there's certain things that we notice when we're tending trees that other people have planted. We both show up to sites a lot where people have had trees in the ground 10, 15, 20 years, and they've never done anything. And a big part of that is a lack of care, and sometimes it's a lack of technique in the actual planting where things can go wrong. So we're just going to go back to the basics and cover our own practices that we follow when we plant a tree. And when we jump into planting a tree, it's a big thing. And there's all these things that we talk about here, like legislation and fighting the county and policies and these things that are really challenging to affect change, and they involve so many different people and so many different places to come together, make decisions in the right way, and move forward. But then there's all these counter decisions going on, and we all have this ability, this really powerful ability to affect change in the present moment. And one of those ways is just by planting a tree, because most of the trees we plant have the capability to be around for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. So I don't think I'll be around in 70 years, but it's amazing to know that some of the trees that I plant can be. And when we're looking at that, what we start with is the process of design here, and site selection, and walking the land, and really feeling out this long-term decision, because it is a really long-term decision when we put trees in ground. And one of the things that we commonly see is we'll show up, and I might be a breadfruit tree, and Jayanti's a lychee tree, and we're these really small, tiny little trees, and people have this tendency. There's a lot of space between us right here, so let's put them here. And it's a common mistake. People go in, let's put them 15 feet apart because they're so little. But what happens, when they grow up and they get really big, and suddenly they're overcrowded and competing against one another. So. So really considering the ultimate potential of what it is we're putting in the ground as we move forward. So, and siting it appropriately on our land. And some of the things that we're observing for in siting our trees is things like wind and sun. Wind meaning is there a lasting wind that we need to take care of to mitigate before our tree even goes in ground? Is there water around? Is there flowing water are we planting a tree in a drainage basin that's just going to get flooded and eroded by the first big rain that comes in the winter? What other existing vegetation is close by? And animal pests is a big consideration. I know where I live, we have a lot of deer, so it's definitely a consideration. I know some of you might have others from the realm of pigs, or even the neighbor's dogs, whatever it might be. And views, definitely an issue on Maui. People have view corridors to maintain, so consider that ultimate height potential as well as the width potential. But really considering that, when we talk about land design, we think about it holistic, like Harry was talking about, the earth thinking in a holistic way. Well, we need to make our decisions for everything we do on our land, including planting a tree, coming from that same holistic place. And this is the beginning of mine and Jayanti's journey in planting a tree that we're gonna take you through. And I have dowsing rods in my hand right now that I'm literally asking the land, where should we plant this tree? And I had a few ideas in mind of general locations, and ultimately I was guided to a very specific spot. Right. So once you've located your spot and you've figured out where the wind's coming from and it's not going to get flooded and all that good stuff, some of the basic things, next is tools. What tools you use? There's the tools that we use to plant the tree for the slide is just a shovel and a pair of Velcro snips. That was it. But there's pickaxes and backhoes and all kinds of things you can use, which then is the next thing, safety. And as you see in the next slides, I was wearing my slippers, using a shovel, not the greatest idea, but I've done it a lot, so I'm okay with that. Not recommended though. And then I got all of them. Nursery stock. This is really, really important. Is properly selecting your trees. So one of the things that Evan mentioned was just not planting a tree properly, but it really starts from the nursery. Some nursery, and I actually have a fruit tree nursery started here on Maui. So that's when the tree actually starts, is in a nursery, and then it usually gets grafted, and then it goes to some sort of outlet store or whatever, and then you come along as a customer and buy the tree and take it home and plant it. There's a lot of variation in quality, and there's a lot of things that can happen with the trees from the nursery to the outlet store, and so selecting your tree is a really, really important part. Full prep technique. Look at in these pictures. So there's my tool. We're on our site here. It's tool and a shovel. So I like to jump on the shovel, get it in there with my weight, and that works really well. And I usually dig out about a 3-foot circle of the grass, pull the grass aside. I usually wait to take the soil off of the grass for last, because it's just easier that it stays on the grass. So we just it's also actually, it's the topsoil layer too, so it would tend to be the most fertile layer. So by waiting till the end, then you get to put that fertile layer back on top. Yeah, the top layer, it's important that it goes back on the top, and we're not mixing the different layers of the soil, because they're very, very different with how much life and what type of life and whatnot is there. So, and the tree responds to that, because the tree, it has roots that, most tree roots are going to be in the top 12 inches of the soil. The top 4 inches are the most alive of the soil, and so most of the little feeder roots are all going to be in that little zone in the soil. So if you're mixing the soil from the bottom of the hole, putting it on the top, and then the tree roots are starting to grow into that, they don't like that. So we got our grass removed, and then we're digging the hole, and what we did here is we got a couple of buckets, and we're actually putting the soil in the buckets, because what that did for us is it made it a lot easier to get the soil back in the hole rather than trying to break it out of the grass. So that's a nice little technique for making it easier. So we filled up 2 buckets with the soil, dug our hole a little bit bigger than the pot size, and that's all you really need to do when you're planting a tree. It just needs to be a little bit bigger than the actual pot size. Some people will dig these ginormous holes and backfill it with all this compost and topsoil. It's really not necessary, and granted there are a lot of variations in soil quality, and so it's not, there's not one way to do it and that's going to work everywhere for everybody, but this in general will work for most situations. So we got our little tree here. This is actually a tree from my nursery. I grafted it myself. This is a Charvel avocado. This is about 1.5 years old, ready to go in the ground. And so once we've got the hole dug, the next step is to really, you want to put the pot in the hole to check the depth, because the depth is a really critical part of planting. When you plant a tree too deep, that top 4 inches of soil, again, is really critical, especially for all those little feeder roots. So if you plant a tree too deep and then you bury it, we got 2 inches of the trunk buried, that just those 2 inches of throwing that critical 4-inch layer off can have major implications for the tree getting established. So
we got the depth check, pulling the tree out, and I usually just flip it upside down, get my hand on it so that it would fall into my hand. I pull the grow bag off. That works well for usually for my trees. Planted Hawaii trees, like for whatever reason, the soil mix they use just all crumbles and falls apart. You can't really do that.
And a key thing I want to point out here too is notice that he's pulling the bag off of the tree. He's not pulling the tree out of the bag. He's not pulling the tree out of the pot. And it's something that I see often. People want to yank that thing out of there, and what happens is they're really yanking it out of the root system. So you want to have a nice ball intact.
Yeah, and I'm being really gentle because the roots are really delicate, and I want to do as little damage as possible. And so this is the taproot, or multiple taproots that have hit the bottom of the grow bag. And with avocados in particular, not so such a big deal for some trees, but avocados, it's really important. If you've got the taproot that's hit the bottom of the pot and started to either spiral up or spiral around, it's really important to cut it, because it can actually branch out from where you cut it and regrow new roots. But if you don't cut it, then it's kind of stuck in that bent shape, and it has a hard time getting out of that. And oftentimes the tree will not take off with vigor if you don't do that. So I cut the taproot. You can see we still got plenty of healthy roots all around. And by the way, most taproots only go down about a foot or two, and then they sort of just die off because of the conditions in the soil don't allow it to go any deeper. You see like some of those big eucalyptus trees, falling over in November, those roots aren't more than 3, maybe 4 feet deep. So that idea that some people have of like the roots going as deep as a tree, no, that doesn't happen here. So, got the tree in the ground, carefully place it in there, filling in all the dirt around it, carefully packing it down around so there's no air spaces around the tree. Excitement around here. Your trees feel it. Your trees feel it. They respond to love and attention and focus amazingly. So there I am, being excited for the tree and for the photo shoot. So now we're going to jump into fertilization and mulching. And please save your questions for the end. We will have some time at the end for questions. When we look at fertilization, the first thing I really like to point out is starting with the soil test and the vital importance of this, because we all have very different soils on this island. Some that have been amended for generations before us, or the previous owner before us. And we don't really know what's going on unless we soil test. And there's different places that we can get soil testing here on the island. CTAR, the college, you can get soil tests done. Logan Labs on the mainland. One that I really like recently is Peaceful Valley Farm and Garden Supply in California. For people who aren't very knowledgeable about soil tests, they actually sell their soil tests with a little booklet on how to read your soil test and how to apply appropriate amendments based on the testing. And what we're going to talk about right now is jumping into different mineral amendments that we use. So this tree was planted with mineral amendments, and compost and mycorrhizal fungi, which is specifically the microbial inoculation and the fungal inoculation that we're giving to get beneficial microbes and beneficial funguses in the soil with our trees when they're planted, so that basically they'll further them in the soil for generations to come. And mulches of all kinds and how to use them. Also in fertilization, not necessarily considered fertilizer, but watering and irrigation. Getting water to our trees, vital, freest for life. And like Jayanti said, I mean, here we are posing, but this is fun. We're having fun doing this, and it's a really fun process. And there's so much love going into this tree, and I guarantee it's going to be happy, just through that process. And we all have the ability to do that for free.
So once our tree is planted, you can actually see really well how you can see the top of the root ball right here. We're pretty much even with this soil level. There's actually a little bit of a bowl going on here, so that the sides around it's kind of hard to see as a little bit of a ring, so that it kind of catches water a little bit better, funnels water and nutrients to the base of the tree while it's young. Can I do that? So now we're putting mineral amendments around the tree, and just kind of an even layer. This is a mixture I'll get into in a moment. You can't see, you can kind of see up top here a little bit, can't see so well, but this dust is not something we want to be breathing in. It's different mineral amendments mined from the earth, it's animal products, any dust that we're breathing isn't a good thing, so we either want to be upwind of it, wear a respirator. Here I'm putting my shirt over my mouth. So it's well dusted, well fertilized, based on a good soil test, and specifically what's in this one. And everyone wants to know what the formula is, and this is the basic formula that I use when full fertilization is needed. But if I know my land is really high in phosphorus, I'm going to adjust appropriately, and I'm not going to necessarily add the full gamut. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, trace minerals, humic acid, mycorrhizal. That's what I prescribe to in terms of wanting my soil to have a good balance of all of those things. And here's some examples of how to get them with feather meal, fishbone meal, green sand, dolomite, lime, azomite. It's personal preference what you want to use. As far as amounts, read the labels, look it up online. Really crucial. Follow your soil test once again. And then we get into compost. Every tree both of us plant gets a good dose of compost. This happens to be composted horse manure from on island. If you want the source of it, they sell it by the pickup truckload. You can talk to me after. And so our tree is now getting a healthy dose of compost around it. It also has kind of the bowl formed around it, so we're still not burying this root mass here, keeping it level. And the love factor right here. Put some intention in it. We can imagine this tree, and this goes back to Patrick McManaway. If you guys were at the Body and Soil Conference, and if you weren't, come next time. What an amazing experience that we get to have with this man who's a fourth generation psychic dowser, and talks about just putting in the love factor because it's free, and putting in our intention and setting our intention for this land, which right here has been cattle pasture. It was Alaragola Dairy used to run cattle on this land. So now here we are having the ability to communicate with the land and connect with the land and share with it. But now a tree is going to be here, and it's going to be an avocado tree, and it's going to produce avocados and shade, and it's going to help regenerate the land. And 5 years from now, at a farmer's union meeting, you can come eat guacamole. Right there, I just set the intention on this tree, and it knows. This is up in Melinda. It knows that this is happening, so it's going to respond in a good way. Getting some water, giving it some water. In some places, you're in Kula, you might want to be setting up an irrigation system because it's going to get old carrying hauling buckets of water. I'm in a climate that's greener, so for the young period, I'll give it bits of water. As far as the proper irrigation, proper moisture level, I kind of seek for everything to be similar to wring out sponge content. If you can think about your sponge when you wring it out, the moisture level that has, that's going to have a soil level that I want to be there. And it's going to ebb and flow through time. Sometimes it's going to get drier, sometimes it's going to get moister. Probably after the first year, I'm not going to think about irrigating this tree because this is up in Olinda, there's enough water falling from the sky. And you can see this little pool of water here. We poured water in there, and there's that little basin that funnels it into the tree itself. So that means when it rains too, the water's coming in there, there's not a massive amount of erosion taking place. And then we jump into mulch, and luckily I'm blessed with big piles of mulch from eucalyptus trees. So this is the source of mulch that we're using on this day. But mulch can be anything, any form of organic matter that you happen to have on your property. You can always go buy wood chips, but you can also use your grass clippings. You can use leaves that you rake up. Whatever you have, you can take cuttings from trees, put it at the base, banana trunks, put it at the base of your trees. Just something to get that soil covered, which is going to do multiple things. One is it's going to hold water in the soil. It's going to have weed suppression so that you don't have more grasses growing or more weeds going. And it's also going to be a slow release fertilizer. As this mulch breaks down through the passage of time, it's just going to continue feeding this tree. And you can see there's a real, healthy amount of mulch going on here. This is a whole wheelbarrow we're putting on, and we had abundant mulch, so here we are using abundant mulch, but it doesn't have to be this much. But the thing that we really recommend is that you constantly have mulch. You don't ever leave your land bare and exposed around our trees.
I'd like to just add one thing too. What the mulch does is it creates a habitat for all the specific life associated with healthy soil. Another really important thing that the mulch is doing.
Yeah, which jumps into the beneficial microbes and beneficial funguses. Through the breakdown of both the manure that's on here and this mulch, it is creating a habitat. So taking time, taking care to put mulch around the tree.
So once the tree's planted and mulched and watered and all loved up, then what? Well, in this case, because there's deer, we have to put some fencing around it. This isn't a permanent solution. This is a temporary fix for a larger island-wide problem that we have. You could look at that as, a solution too, to our food issues and whatever. But for this little tree, it can be a big problem to have a deer come and just eat all the leaves off. So, different situations. Not everyone has deer, but some people might have chickens or cows walking around or whatever. So it's really important to think about these things and address them. Hopefully before you're going to plant it, so you know what you're going to do right after you plant it. But especially immediately after it's planted, because one night and it can be the end of that tree's life. So. And then let's see. Maintenance. This is really important, especially when you're planting grafted trees. Not all fruit trees are grafted, but if you are planting grafted fruit trees, it's really important to know where your graft is, because I've been to so many people's properties and seen trees that a sprout came up from below the graft and grew up, and they're usually more vigorous coming from below the graft, and so they take over the graft, and the graft dies, and then you end up with this seedling tree that not only might take a long time to fruit, but might be really poor quality. So that particularly when a tree is young, it's really important to identify where the graft is and make sure that nothing sprouts from below the graft. All the energy wants to come and go through the graft and out the top. Another thing that I personally find really important is labels. So you know what variety of tree it was, and in this particular case, I have the date at which I grafted it. These labels work really well if you write on them with a pencil. If you use permanent marker, they'll fade quite quickly. But there's also other sort of long-term labeling systems you can get, and I highly recommend it. It's just really nice to know what kinds of fruit trees you have after 5 years, 10 years. And then, of course, the mulch is probably going to disappear. The earth is actually going to eat it. The earthworms, the fungus, within 2 years, most of that mulch is going to be gone. So maintenance is going to be either adding more mulch, planting things around it that you can sort of cut and use for mulch. Watering, of course. For those of you that don't know, urine is actually an amazing fertilizer. Trees love it.
And it's free.
And it's free. It's actually really, really good. Trees absolutely love it. It is important not to pee on the trees. They don't like that, but next to them, they love it. So, no pH test required. So that's it.
Yeah, the question is, have we ever had had any trouble with crown rot, and if we raised up trees so that that wouldn't happen.
I never had that situation. Most of our soils here on Maui have fairly good drainage, and avocados definitely have had root rot, but that's just, I don't know if raising them up is actually going to help that. There's just some places that are just not good for avocados. So.
Thank you. The question was just to be clear that we put no amendments down in the hole. And it's true, we put everything on the top layer. And one thing we have going on here in the subtropical climate is the breakdown of nutrients in the soil happens really rapidly. And we do have very porous soils, so drainage is also happening very rapidly. So by putting it in that top layer, it's basically just getting the stay power of the nutrients we're putting in there and the biological activity. It's getting it up towards the upper surface so that it'll just percolate down through time.
And again, that top 4 inches is where most of the action happens and most of the feeder roots are feeding. So yeah, all the amendments. The question is, he dug up an avocado tree that was 2 years old, had taproot growth, transplanted it, not doing very well. So probably not. Avocados, they're very sensitive to root damage and whatnot, and I would say it's probably better to start off with a new one.
And one thing about planting trees, Jayanti talked a bit about nursery stock, is this is a long-term thing. If we're talking about a $30 tree that can last us and produce for us for 20, 30 years, I'd rather get a new one if I have any doubts that it's not going to work well. I'd rather invest another $30 to get one that I know it's going to be really good quality and I know it's going to last. So if I have a question about it, I personally will use it right away. And in the research I've done on it, is what I found is that within 6 months the chemical composition changes and becomes a non-issue. So this happened to be over a year old, so we're clear on that.
And this wasn't Robusta. I believe Robusta doesn't have the same tannins that the other eucalyptus has. The Robusta and the rainbow eucalyptus are fine to use right away.
The comment was you can mix lime with your eucalyptus chips to raise the pH, or lower the pH.
The question is, if a citrus tree or any grafted tree really is the rootstock has sprouted back, and it's already sort of stressing out or reducing the graft and growing, can you cut those back and will it, yes. The answer is yes. Cut it back, the sooner you get that rootstock cut back and redirecting all the energy into the graft, the better. Yes?
Why did you graft the avocado as opposed to taking the seed and rooting the seed?
So the question is, why did you graft the avocado as opposed to just planting the seed? A couple of reasons. When you plant an avocado seed, you don't know what kind of avocado you're going to get. So for instance, we planted a Charwell avocado. The only way to get a Charwell avocado is through grafting or some sort of asexual propagation method. If you plant a Charwell seed, you're going to get some sort of variation because of cross-pollination and genetic mutation. It's not going to be Charwell. But that's how you get new varieties. The other reason is that it'll fruit sooner if you graft it. You usually get fruit in 3 to 5 years as opposed to potentially, 10 years.
Thank you, Evan and Jayanti. Great job, you guys. Okay.